If you're going to insure it,
Insurance, okay.
I would insure it for at least $1 million.
Are you serious? Oh my. Holy smokes.
It is the greatest archive I have ever had at the Roadshow.
Really?
Some treasures don't just shock their owners. They shock the very people whose job is to identify priceless antiques. On Antiques Roadshow, these rare moments happen only when something truly extraordinary appears.
But probably somewhere around $200,000 retail price.
I was thinking, several tens of thousands maybe. 200,000 possibly.
Well,
Welcome to our channel. Today, we're counting down the most jaw-dropping appraiser reactions ever seen on Antiques Roadshow. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for more incredible hidden treasure stories. What if the most important baseball collection you've ever seen wasn't sitting in a museum or the Hall of Fame, but had remained in an ordinary family's possession for more than 140 years? That's exactly the story of Gail. When she arrived at the appraisal table, she brought only a few old baseball cards and a faded letter that had aged with time. At first glance, the collection looked surprisingly modest, but within seconds the expert realized this was anything but ordinary.
These are among the oldest baseball cards in existence.
The story begins in 1871. Gail's great-great-grandmother ran a boarding house in Boston, and the people staying there were not ordinary guests. They were members of the Boston Red Stockings, one of the earliest professional baseball teams in American history.
Back in 1871, my great-great-grandmother had a boarding house in Boston, and she housed the Boston baseball team.
The players lived there, shared meals there, and became part of the family's everyday life. Because of that connection, a young boy in the family began saving cards of the very players he saw on a regular basis. But the most remarkable item wasn't the cards. It was a letter.
While they were on a road trip in 1871 visiting the Washington Olympics, they got rained out, and they wrote her a letter at their boarding house telling her how much they missed her.
Just imagine that for a moment. An entire baseball team traveling on the road took the time to write to the woman who had cared for them. And on that letter were the signatures of nearly the entire roster. The signatures of men who helped lay the foundation for professional baseball in America.
Tremendous. To have anything with their signatures on it is phenomenal.
This wasn't simply sports memorabilia. It was a surviving piece of baseball's earliest history. And when the expert assembled everything into a single archive, the atmosphere immediately changed.
It is the greatest archive I have ever had at the Roadshow.
That alone was an extraordinary statement. But the real shock was still to come.
If you're going to insure it,
Insurance, okay.
I would insure it for at least $1 million.
Are you serious? Oh my. Holy smokes.
$1 million. For a handful of old baseball cards, one old letter, and a family story that had survived for more than a century. Because sometimes the greatest value isn't found in the object itself. It's found in the fact that it survived long enough to tell a chapter of history the world had nearly forgotten. If someone told you that an old cigar box sitting in the corner of a closet could contain a small fortune, most people probably wouldn't believe it. But that's exactly how this story begins. No safe, no climate-controlled storage room. Just an old box that had been forgotten for decades.
I found them in the cigar box that you see in the back of the closet.
Inside that box was a baseball card collection that even experienced collectors would love to own. And within minutes of examining it, the expert realized these were far from ordinary cards. This was a collection of 1,948 leaf baseball cards, one of the most sought-after post-war baseball card sets ever produced. But the discovery that changed everything came down to a single name.
The rookie card of one of the most important people of the 20th century, Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson, the man who broke Major League Baseball's color barrier and became one of the most influential figures in American sports history. Owning one of his rookie cards would already be remarkable. But the owner didn't have just one.
You got 3 of those.
Yeah.
3 rookie cards, all sitting inside an old cigar box. all surviving for decades with almost no one paying attention to them. And Robinson was only the beginning. The collection also included names like Ted Williams, Bob Feller, and Satchel Paige, legends who helped define an entire era of American baseball.
1948 was kind of one of the first years after the war that a card set was produced, so there were a lot of rookies in that set.
Okay.
As the appraisal continued, the value of the collection began climbing quickly, especially the Jackie Robinson cards.
Because these sell for between $15,000 and $20,000 each.
Oh my God.
Right?
Okay.
$15,000 to $20,000 for a single card. And that was only part of the collection. Then came the number that left the owner nearly speechless.
I would put an insurance estimate on just these 1948 leaf cards, the whole collection here, of $150,000.
$150,000, all from an old cigar box sitting in the corner of a closet. And that's what makes hidden treasure stories so fascinating. Because sometimes the most valuable thing in your house isn't locked away in a safe. It's simply waiting to be discovered after years of being forgotten. The Navajo Ute First Phase Blanket.
Nobody's ever looked at it that I'm aware of.
For generations, this blanket had simply been part of the family. The owner knew very little about it. He had heard that it might have been connected to Kit Carson and passed down through the family, but beyond that, it was just an old blanket that had always been there. What happened next was something he never expected.
Did you notice when you showed this to me that I kind of stopped breathing a little bit?
Yeah, you did.
I'm still having a little bit of trouble breathing here.
The expert's reaction said everything. The longer he looked, the more convinced he became that he was standing in front of one of the most important Native American textiles he had ever encountered on Antiques Roadshow.
And it's not just a Chief's blanket, it's the first type of Chief's blanket made.
This wasn't simply an old blanket. It was a first-phase Chief's blanket, woven by Navajo artisans for Ute leaders sometime between the 1840s and 1860s. Its design was strikingly simple. No elaborate patterns, no complicated decoration, yet that simplicity was exactly what made it so important.
This is Navajo weaving in its purest form. All of these things that we see later with diamonds and all kinds of different patterns comes much later than this. This is just pure linear design. This is the beginning of Navajo weaving.
In many ways, this textile represented the foundation of an entire weaving tradition. Even more remarkable was its condition. After more than a century and a half, it had survived in a state that few experts would have thought possible.
The condition of this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. We see these, we've got a little bit of damage over there. We have a very interesting thing here. This is almost like silk. It's made from hand-woven wool, but it's so finely done, it's like silk. It would repel water. And this here is dyed with indigo dyes. It was a very valuable dye at the time. And what's really interesting is right here, we have an old repair that was probably done in the 1860s. And it's done with raveled bayeta, which is in itself a very important thing in Navajo weaving. So all involved. It's an extraordinary piece of art. It's extremely rare. It is the most important thing that's come into the roadshow that I've seen.
Its age, rarity, and historical importance placed it in a category far beyond most antiques. Then came the question that changed the mood of the appraisal.
Are you a wealthy man, Ted?
No.
The answer drew a laugh, but only moments later, the true significance of the blanket became clear.
On a really bad day, this textile would be worth $350,000. On a good day, it's about $500,000.
Oh my God.
$500,000 for a blanket. Yet the most unforgettable part of the story came after the valuation.
I'm just laying on the back of a chair.
Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
For years, a national treasure had been resting on the back of a chair, and an entire family had been living alongside a piece of American history without ever realizing it.
I was taking lessons when I was a student in high school. My parents talked to my music teacher who had been in Italy, and he mentioned a place in Bologna, possibly knew of POGGI, the manufacturer, the maker of it. And fortunately, my grandfather was on a trip to Italy and took a detour to Bologna to meet up with the maker.
What did he pay for it?
The number that comes to mind as a kid was $600.
Yeah.
This instrument then became my instrument all through high school and college.
A viola bought for a high school student. At first, it sounds like a very ordinary family story. A young music student needed a better instrument. A music teacher mentioned a maker in Bologna. The grandfather happened to be in Italy, so he took a detour to meet the maker directly. The price in the guest's memory was only about $600, and then that viola became his instrument through high school and college. But that ordinary beginning is exactly what makes the twist so powerful. Because this was not an anonymous Italian instrument with a nice-looking label inside. This was an Ansaldo POGGI made in Bologna in 1967. In the world of fine string instruments, the name POGGI carries serious weight. He was not a mass producer. He was an Italian maker known for precise craftsmanship, beautiful wood selection, and almost obsessive standards. With a violin or viola, an appraiser cannot simply read the label and believe it. He has to examine the wood, the form, the wear, the handwriting inside, the brand, and every sign of construction. And this viola had strong clues. Spruce top, flamed maple, POGGI's handwriting inside the body, the A. POGGI brand, and family provenance that matched the trip to Bologna. But one detail made the story even more intense. This was a viola. POGGI is known to have made at least hundreds of instruments, but only 41 violas. Only 41. So how would the market see a viola once bought as a student instrument but carrying the name Ansaldo POGGI?
I talked to some of my colleagues about the marketplace. Good news is that in the Asian market and in the European market, the value for an Ansaldo POGGI viola in this kind of condition would be more like $300,000.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't intend to sell it, you know.
For insurance purposes, I would put this at $330,000.
Sometimes a treasure is not forgotten in a corner. Sometimes it has been close all along, held, played, and simply waiting for someone to call its true value by name. 1892 H.F. Farny watercolor and gouache painting. What could possibly turn a picture once valued at only a few $100s into a masterpiece worth hundreds of thousands? This time, the answer began with a mosquito.
Not sure if it's a print or a painting, but when I got it, there was a mosquito underneath the glass. So I took it out to the front yard and I opened it up to get the mosquito out so I could take it with me to college. And then it kind of scared me a little. I closed it back up immediately because it looked like it might be real.
For years, the family believed this was nothing more than an ordinary print hanging above the grandmother's bed. Even previous appraisals never suggested otherwise. The picture was simply grouped with the household furnishings and quietly forgotten. Everything changed when a tiny mosquito prompted the owner to open the frame.
It was appraised in like a general house appraisal twice. In 1998, it was appraised as a print at $200, and in 2004, it was appraised at $250.
Twice it was appraised. Twice it was identified as a print worth only a few $100s. But a closer look by the Antiques Roadshow experts revealed something completely different. It was an original work by Henry Francois Farny, one of America's most celebrated painters of Native American life. Its outstanding composition, excellent condition, and highly desirable subject matter made it exactly the kind of painting collectors hope to find.
So if we were going to put this in an auction today, I would suggest an estimate of $200,000 to $300,000.
From just a few $100s to an auction estimate of $200,000 to $300,000. In an instant, every previous appraisal became meaningless.
Oh my God. That's so much. I don't even know what to say. Should I have left the mosquito in the back?
No, it's good that the bug wasn't there anymore.
A tiny mosquito unexpectedly became part of one of the most unforgettable appraisals in Antiques Roadshow history. Had the owner never opened the frame that day, the artwork might have remained nothing more than a print worth a few $100s. Instead, the family discovered they had owned an original Henry Francois Farny painting worth as much as $300,000. That's what makes Antiques Roadshow so fascinating. Sometimes all it takes is one small detail to completely change the story of a work of art. This piece began with a trip to Europe in 1969 when the owner was only 14 years old. His family stopped to visit one of his father's friends south of Paris. And by chance, that visit led directly to the family of Alexander Calder.
When I was 14, I traveled to Europe with my parents, and it turns out his friend was married to the daughter of Alexander Calder.
That detail makes the story much more than a simple line of provenance. As a young boy, he saw Calder inside his studio. He had seen Calder's hand affected by Parkinson's, but when the artist began working, that same hand became still. Then his 15th birthday arrived during that very trip, and the gift he received was not an ordinary souvenir.
I had my 15th birthday while we were there, and that was in July of 1969. And he presented me this sculpture as my 15th birthday present. I saw him working in his shop on something similar to this.
A sculpture given directly by Alexander Calder, and possibly made by him around the same time the owner had seen him working in the studio. For a work of art, provenance like that is almost impossible to improve. But the expert still had to examine the object itself, the structure, the movement, the signature, and Calder's place in 20th century art.
Calder is one of America's leading sculptors of the 20th century. And this is wonderful because you have the base and this amazingly balanced piece.
It is both stable and moving, a very Calder kind of balance, simple at first glance but carefully calculated in weight and motion. The piece has a monogram, it is handmade, and most importantly, the story behind it is almost unbelievably strong.
I've never heard of better provenance on something artistic than what you've given us. But it still has to be submitted to the Alexander Calder Foundation. They authenticate pieces.
Even with remarkable provenance, the art market still needs official authentication. But even before that final step, the expert gave a number that completely changed the mood of the case.
They're fairly rare, and especially in this size. In a gallery setting, this would be $250,000.
Wow. Jeez, that's amazing. I mean, it's probably worth more than that to me, just in memories, but that's spectacular.
Yeah.
$250,000 for a birthday gift. But for the owner, the memory may be worth even more than the number. This is not just a Calder. It is the moment a 15-year-old boy stepped into the world of a great artist and carried a piece of that memory with him for the rest of his life. If someone asked you to name the single firearm that changed the future of modern warfare, you'd probably think of a machine gun, an assault rifle, or some revolutionary weapon from the 20th century. You probably wouldn't think of a small revolver made nearly 200 years ago. But that's exactly where today's story begins.
I've had it over 40 years, and I've always collected antique arms.
And this pistol was made by Sam COLT in Paterson, New Jersey, and his patent was 1836. Yeah. I would say that this was actually made in the first months of 1837.
That was the breakthrough moment. Because if the expert was correct, this wasn't simply an early Colt revolver. It could be one of the very first examples produced after Colt's revolutionary design entered the world. And that changes everything. Today, firing 5 rounds without reloading sounds completely ordinary. In 1837, it was a different story. Most soldiers were still carrying firearms that fired once and then required a lengthy reload before they could shoot again. In a real fight, those extra seconds could mean the difference between survival and disaster.
And you would have 5 shots because it's a revolver. Yeah. Now, Colt didn't invent the revolver, he just perfected it.
And that perfection is what made this firearm so important. It proved that sustained firepower was possible. It showed what the future could look like. For many historians, firearms development can almost be divided into 2 periods, before revolvers like this and after them. The experts certainly believed its importance went that far.
In my opinion, this is the most important firearm ever made in the development and the history of firearms.
By now, there was only one question left. How much was something like this actually worth? And perhaps even more surprising, how much had the owner paid for it all those years ago?
So, how much did you buy it for?
Originally, I paid £150 for it.
Well, I have no reason to doubt that it's not a right one. If it is, then I think it's got to be £150,000.
From £150 to £150,000. A 1,000-fold increase. The kind of valuation that would shock almost any collector. But even that wasn't the biggest surprise. After decades spent examining historic firearms, the expert believed he was looking at the single most important firearm he had ever encountered on Antiques Roadshow. And somehow, this was only the beginning of our countdown. Sometimes the reason a collection ends up being worth tens of thousands of dollars isn't because someone found a hidden treasure, it's because someone unknowingly saved it from disappearing forever. This story begins with a collection of old baseball cards that had been sitting in the family for years. They had been around for so long that nobody really thought of them as anything extraordinary, and things might have stayed that way if one ordinary weekend hadn't changed everything.
One weekend while my husband was gone, I decided I'd just look at them, and as I'm sorting them, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's really got a nice collection.
The wife began organizing items around the house and gathering things that had been scattered in different places. Among them was this baseball card collection. At the time, it felt like nothing more than a routine household project, but only a month later, that simple decision would prove incredibly important.
And then the neat thing about it is that a month after I did that, our home got hit by a tornado and everything in that attic disappeared.
A tornado tore through the property. The house suffered devastating damage. Countless possessions were destroyed or lost entirely, yet somehow the cards survived, simply because they had been moved before the storm arrived.
But you had rescued these cards about a month prior.
Just a month prior, so it's like, wow.
Without that decision, this story might have ended before it ever began. Instead, the experts now had the opportunity to examine the collection card by card, revealing names like Ted Williams and Jackie Robinson before arriving at the card that immediately captured everyone's attention. Mickey Mantle.
So last card we have is the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle rookie card.
Right.
In the world of baseball cards, few names carry more weight than Mickey Mantle. A single card can dramatically change the value of an entire collection, which is why the owner's expression changed as soon as the expert began discussing its potential.
So this one, I assigned a numerical grade of 5. We put an auction value on that one of $30,000 to $40,000.
You're kidding. Seriously.
Yeah. The numerical grades are so important to the collectors.
Yeah.
And on some of the high-end cards, that numerical grade, the difference of a 5 or a 6 is tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But let's just say if I was too strict and it was to grade a 6, then we would be looking at $80,000 to $120,000.
Oh my God.
Even without reaching that higher grade, the collection's value was still remarkable. What had once been a group of cards sitting quietly in a family home had become a collection worth tens of thousands of dollars, and one that came dangerously close to being lost forever. Because sometimes a treasure isn't valuable simply because it's rare. Sometimes it's valuable because it survived. The Beatrice CENCI MICROMOSAIC. At first glance, most people would assume this is simply a painted portrait. The closer you look, however, the more extraordinary it becomes.
I was amazed that something made from stone or ceramic could actually look like a painting.
These are actually glass.
What appears to be a painting is actually something entirely different. This is a micromosaic, a highly specialized art form created from thousands of tiny pieces of colored glass assembled so precisely that, from a distance, they become almost indistinguishable from brushstrokes.
Up to 15,000 different colors in glass would have been made to create micromosaic artwork.
That remarkable craftsmanship is only part of the story. The subject of the portrait is Beatrice CENCI, one of the most tragic and controversial figures in Italian history. According to the story that has survived through the centuries, she endured years of abuse at the hands of her father before becoming involved in his murder. She was later tried, convicted, and executed, transforming her into a figure viewed by many as both a victim and a criminal.
She was both a heroine as well as a murderess.
She's a tragic hero, absolutely.
Her dramatic story inspired generations of artists, writers, and poets throughout the 19th century. As the expert examined the plaque more closely, he discovered the signature of Moglia.
It was almost certainly done in Italy.
The Moglia family was among the finest makers of Italian micromosaics, and works of this scale rarely appear on the market.
The art of micromosaic on this sort of scale, which is actually very, very large for a mosaic, is incredibly rare and incredibly exciting to find on Antiques Roadshow.
That rarity explains why the expert could barely contain his excitement.
I nearly leapt over my colleague to look at this.
Then came the valuation.
I would think an insurance valuation of $85,000.
Cool.
Would be a fair price.
$85,000 for a work assembled from countless tiny fragments of glass. But what makes it truly memorable is the way a centuries-old Italian tragedy was preserved in a masterpiece that, at first glance, looks like nothing more than an ordinary painting. If someone offered you $200 for an old baseball sitting in your house, there's a good chance you would take the deal without thinking twice. And that almost became the fate of this baseball. It wasn't displayed in a museum. It wasn't locked away in a safe. It wasn't treated like an important piece of sports history. For decades, it was simply an old keepsake that had been sitting quietly in the owner's home. What makes the story even more remarkable is that the owner wasn't a serious collector. He received the baseball when he was around 13 years old and kept it for decades without realizing what he actually had.
1919 World Championship baseball. They were given to me roughly about 38 years ago, I'd say. I must have been about 13 years old. A friend of my mom's gave them to me before he went back to Texas.
At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a signed baseball. But as soon as the expert began examining it, the story took a dramatic turn. This was a 1919 Cincinnati Reds World Series Championship baseball, connected to one of the most famous seasons in baseball history. And the most astonishing part wasn't its age, it was its rarity.
Championship team signed baseballs are very, very collectible. The earlier you go, the rarer they get.
Maybe 20.
How about less than 5? I would put an auction estimate of between $45,000 and $50,000.
Phew. That's a little more than I thought.
Yeah.
Fewer than 5 examples are known to exist. That single fact transformed the baseball from an old family possession into an exceptionally rare historical artifact. Its surface still carried the signatures of the championship team, including some of the most important figures from the 1919 Cincinnati Reds. Even more impressive, many of those signatures remained legible after more than a century. For a baseball from 1919, that is extraordinarily uncommon. Then the conversation ended with a moment that left everyone smiling.
This is by far the best baseball I've ever seen on the roadshow. So
glad I brought some excitement to you, because you brought some excitement to me. My wife almost sold it for $200.
Well, I'm glad she didn't.
From a childhood gift to a valuation of $45,000 to $50,000. And all of it came within a single decision of being sold for just $200. That's what makes stories like this so compelling. Because sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found in famous collections or major auctions. They're sitting quietly inside ordinary homes, waiting for someone to recognize their true value before it's too late. Some collectibles increase in value over time. And then there are pieces that appreciate so dramatically that the numbers almost seem impossible. This case began with 2 silver bracelets purchased by the owner's parents through the Heard Museum in the early 1970s. The original price? Less than $200 each. Decades later, they arrived at Antiques Roadshow and immediately caught the appraiser's attention.
My parents collected jewelry from the Southwest, and these are 2 Charles Loloma pieces that I believe they got in the early 70s through the Heard Museum. And we actually have the receipts. So that it was under $200 per piece.
The moment the name Charles Loloma entered the conversation, everything changed. Loloma is widely regarded as one of the most influential figures in the history of Native American jewelry. But these bracelets came from a much earlier period in his career, and that is exactly what made them so special.
These are by Charles Loloma. He is really the godfather of American Indian jewelry. His influence and his impact on jewelry altogether has just been unprecedented.
For many collectors, early works hold a unique appeal. They tend to be simpler, more authentic, and closer to the artist's original vision. That was one of the reasons the appraiser was so excited by this pair.
The thing that's really exciting about these two, they're early. But I backpedal to this period, which I like the best. Very innately Hopi, and I just love that.
The owner estimated that the two bracelets might be worth around $15,000. That already sounded like an extraordinary return on the original purchase price. But the appraiser was only getting started. Both pieces were signed, retained their original receipts, and came with clear provenance from the Heard Museum.
I would say for the two pieces, about $15,000.
Okay. I would venture to say that in today's market, this bracelet alone, probably in the retail marketplace, about $25,000.
Whoa. Can I sit down? Only kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
That was only the first bracelet.
This bracelet,
wow,
maybe a little more. Like, why? Because people like turquoise. And it's just a really great example of his restraint and creativity. $28,000.
From under $200 each to $25,000 and $28,000. It was one of the most dramatic value increases in the entire video. But the most remarkable part wasn't just the money. The owner's parents had unknowingly chosen the right artist at the right moment and acquired the right pieces long before the market fully understood just how important Charles Loloma would become. This story begins with a family box. At first glance, there was nothing inside that immediately looked extraordinary. Instead, it contained a collection of small keepsakes that had been passed down through generations, all connected by a single name that most baseball fans today would probably never recognize.
My great-great-uncle, Leslie NUNAMAKER, played professional baseball from 1911 to about 1920 with teams like Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees, St. Louis Browns, and Cleveland Indians.
And this is some of his?
Yes, it is.
What made the collection interesting wasn't one spectacular artifact standing on its own. It was the way the pieces worked together, preserving the life of a player who spent his career during one of the most important eras in early professional baseball. As the expert moved through the photographs, documents, and personal memorabilia, one item slowly emerged as the centerpiece of the entire collection: a championship medal.
And finally, we have a 1912 Boston Red Sox championship medal. And this was awarded to your great-great-uncle. And if we turn it around here, we'll see it's also been engraved with his name.
That was the moment the collection became something much larger than a group of family keepsakes. This wasn't simply an item connected to history. It was an item physically awarded to someone who had participated in that history. And when the expert began discussing how rarely these medals appear, the conversation took another dramatic turn.
I know of a couple in existence. I've never seen one outside of the Hall of Fame or outside of a historical society.
Really?
Now, the players got diamonds in their championship medals. This one, the diamond has been removed. The good news is that that can be replaced.
Sure.
Okay? But this medal can never be replaced.
Wow.
That distinction perfectly captures the difference between material value and historical value. A missing diamond can be replaced. A century-old championship medal with a direct connection to a World Series team cannot. Its survival depends entirely on the fact that someone cared enough to preserve it for more than 100 years. Then came the moment that clearly meant the most to the owner.
No less than $25,000.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's just great. What's that one worth?
That's probably worth, 20 grand.
$20,000. I got a tear in my eye.
The owner's reaction revealed that this was never just a story about money, because sometimes the most meaningful discovery isn't learning what a family heirloom is worth. It's realizing that a piece of your family's history has been quietly connected to the history of an entire sport all along. Among the thousands of stories featured on Antiques Roadshow, some are unforgettable because of the money. Others stand out because of their history. But the next story is remarkable for an entirely different reason. It begins with an old box of World War II memorabilia, and it ends with a reunion so extraordinary that it almost feels impossible to believe.
So I brought some of my dad's World War II memorabilia. He was a Dutch Jedburgh, a special ops soldier, and he jumped with General Gavin of the 82nd Airborne.
Right from the beginning, it was already a fascinating story. A special operations soldier, a wartime parachute mission, a connection to one of the most respected American generals of World War II. But then the owner shared another detail that made everyone listen even more closely.
My dad was walking point, and he spotted a machine gunist in a tree and shot him before the machine gunnist had a chance to shoot General Gavin. So General Gavin has always credited my dad with saving his life.
Up to that point, many people might have assumed it was simply a remarkable family story passed down through the generations. Then something happened that no one in the room could have expected. Right there at the Antiques Roadshow event.
I know the story that he saved my grandfather's life, because my grandfather was General Gavin.
The room fell almost completely silent. Two families who had never met before suddenly discovered they had been connected by a single moment on a World War II battlefield decades earlier. It was the kind of coincidence that would seem unbelievable if it appeared in a movie.
But the meat of the value of what you brought today is right here in those three wings.
Really?
While everyone was still absorbing that extraordinary reunion, the expert turned his attention to the three cloth wings lying on the table. At first glance, they looked surprisingly ordinary, but their provenance changed everything.
But because they're him, they're a little better than average. You have in the neighborhood of $10,000 worth of cloth insignia right there on that table.
No way.
About $10,000. Not because they were made from precious materials, but because they belonged to the soldier who saved General Gavin's life, and because they became part of one of the most extraordinary reunions ever witnessed on Antiques Roadshow. Sometimes the true value of a historical artifact isn't found in the object itself. It's found in the people, the memories, and the unexpected connections it brings back together many decades later. And at first glance, this ring could look like just another antique sapphire ring. But in the world of antique jewelry, sometimes the greatest value is hidden in the smallest details. A tiny carving, a small mark, a name hidden within the piece. And with this ring, everything started with a final gift left behind by a close friend.
It was left to me from a very dear friend who I'd known for many years, and he passed quite recently. I'd not seen him for nearly 2 years though, and I just got a letter out of the blue saying that I'd been left a load of his things.
At first, this ring did not enter the story as an expensive collector's item. It was a memory from a friend who had passed away, someone who loved art and objects with deeper stories behind them. But when the experts started looking closer, the ring slowly revealed a completely different level of value. The blue stone at the center was not just a sapphire, it was a sapphire intaglio. Instead of adding an image onto the surface, the intaglio technique requires an artist to carve directly into the stone, creating a miniature work of art inside an extremely hard material. And the figure carved into this sapphire was Julius Caesar, one of the most famous names from ancient Rome. But the detail that truly changed everything was not only the carving, it was the maker behind it. A small mark showing two letter C's facing away from each other connected the ring to Castellani, one of the most important jewelry ateliers in 19th century Rome. Castellani became famous for reviving inspiration from ancient Greece and Rome, creating pieces that were not only decorative but also carried history and artistic meaning. That gave this small ring several layers of value. It was a sapphire. It was an intaglio artwork. It carried the image of Julius Caesar. And most importantly, it carried the mark of a jeweler recognized by collectors. Something that first looked like a simple ring was actually holding a story that stretched across centuries.
Because it's not worth £1,000, it's worth £5,000.
Oh my God.
£5,000? But that number was only one part of what made this ring special. For collectors, the value came from Castellani, the intaglio technique, and the connection to ancient inspired art. But for the owner, it was still a final gift from an important friend. That is what makes antique jewelry different. One object can preserve hundreds of years of history while still holding a deeply personal human story. This ring did not capture attention because of its size. It captured attention because of what was hidden inside it. An ancient symbol, the mark of an important artist, and the memory of the person who chose to leave it behind. We've reached the upper half of today's countdown, and at this point the discoveries are becoming increasingly impressive. The next piece is one that seemed to captivate the expert almost from the moment he saw it. Not because of its size, not because of any royal connection, but because of the extraordinary quality of the stone at its center.
What an opal that is. It's perfect.
And that's not the sort of praise experts hand out lightly. This remarkable opal came from Australia and was given to its owner as an 18th birthday present. Like many young people receiving a beautiful piece of jewelry, she simply saw it as a treasured gift from her family. What she didn't realize was that she was holding an exceptional gemstone that would leave even a seasoned specialist struggling to hide his excitement. The longer he examined it, the more impressed he became.
I'm too afraid to wear it because it's just so beautiful.
For opal collectors, everything comes down to color. The finest stones seem almost alive, constantly changing as they catch the light. Blue, green, yellow, orange, red. A shifting display of color that appears and disappears with every movement. It's a quality that very few gemstones can match, and according to the expert, this particular opal possessed nearly everything a collector could hope to find.
It's a very, very vibrant stone indeed. It's a very unusual shape.
The stone was mounted in an arts and crafts design dating to around 1915. More than a century old. Beautifully preserved. And still capable of stopping people in their tracks? Taken together, the age, condition, craftsmanship, and quality of the opal elevated this piece far beyond the category of an ordinary family gift. Then came the valuation.
Would you rather I said £4,000 today?
Very calm, yes, that would be very good.
Good. All right. Well, there we are then. I'm telling you. I think it's a really, really beautiful opal.
From a valuation of around £700 in the past to approximately £4,000 today. An impressive rise for a pendant that has already survived more than 110 years. And when an expert says a gemstone actually talks to him, you know, some questions are enough to pull viewers closer to the screen the moment they are asked. What is in the box? And in this case, the answer is not jewelry, historical papers, or a rare piece of pottery. Inside the box is a plaster head, real human hair, real human eyelashes, and a fake hand so strange and unsettling that it is almost impossible to look away.
Inside the box, we found this wonderful plaster head with human hair, human eyelashes, and a strangely realistic human hand. What can you tell us about the contents of the box?
I don't know if anyone has heard of Willie Sutton. He was a famous bank robber, well-known bank robber. He was also well-known for breaking out of prisons. This was his that he used in an attempted breakout.
Willie Sutton was not only famous for robbing banks, he was also famous for escaping from prison, and the head in this box was not some bizarre decoration. It was part of a failed prison break plan, a dummy head and a dummy hand, placed in a bed to fool the guards into thinking Sutton was still lying there. In this case, provenance is everything. Without the story of the owner's grandfather working at the prison, and without the box and its label, this might only be a creepy plaster head. But once it is connected to Willie Sutton, it becomes a real crime artifact. Hair from the prison barber shop, real eyelashes, a head made inside prison with a hand arranged as if it were gripping the edge of a bedsheet. The more the story unfolds, the creepier the object becomes, because it is not just a prop, it was once part of a real escape attempt.
And after conferring with my colleagues, we were able to give it a very conservative auction estimate of $2,500 to $3,500.
Wow, that's nice. That's very nice. That's surprising.
As far as I know, this is the first head in the box we've had on Roadshow.
$2,500 to $3,500 for the first head in a box on Roadshow. This may be one of the creepiest cases in the entire video, not simply because it is a fake head, but because it was a real fake head used in a real prison escape attempt by a real bank robber. Our next case is a perfect reminder that not every hidden treasure is made of gold, platinum, or diamonds. Sometimes one of the most surprising appraisals begins with a piece of costume jewelry. This necklace had been sitting in the family for years and was believed to have belonged to the owner's grandmother, or possibly even her great-grandmother. According to the family story, they were never wealthy people, so no one ever imagined that this necklace might carry any significant value.
I believe it was my grandma's, maybe my great-grandma's. They were very poor, so they had to work with what they could find.
That doesn't exactly sound like the beginning of a valuable treasure story. But only seconds after seeing the necklace, the expert seemed to know exactly what he was looking at.
It's called a bib necklace. It's a fabulous necklace. It was made in the 1950s-60s by a company that we used to call Juliana.
This turned out to be a striking example of a Juliana bib necklace, a name that has become highly sought after among costume jewelry collectors. What's especially interesting is that most Juliana pieces were never permanently marked. There were no logos, no hallmarks, and no reliable identifying marks attached to the jewelry itself. For years, collectors weren't even completely certain who had produced many of these pieces.
On the jewelry itself, it's not marked in any way, but they use paper tags, and so the paper tags were lost.
And that's exactly why discoveries like this can be so surprising. What appears to be an ordinary family necklace can actually carry decades of mystery and collector interest. But what truly made this piece stand out wasn't just its history, it was its size.
Oh.
They have different sizes of this necklace. This is the gargantuan size.
Really?
In other words, this was the giant version, a spectacular explosion of color featuring layer upon layer of sparkling rhinestones. Green stones, pink aurora borealis stones, bright orange stones, every section seemed to catch the light differently.
And we also have green tourmaline rhinestones. We have pink aurora borealis rhinestones. We have orange rhinestones. You name it, we have it in this necklace.
It's not hard to understand why this necklace immediately became the center of attention during the appraisal, but the biggest surprise was still waiting.
These necklaces routinely sell for between $800 and $1,000.
Oh, go Grandma.
From a family costume necklace to a value approaching $1,000. And judging by that reaction, the owner probably wasn't the only person in the room who was surprised by that reveal.
I have brought a bracelet that my mother gave me several years ago, and she bought it before she was married. I believe it was in the 40s, and she told me she paid $35 for it. I know she liked estate jewelry, and she was interested in older pieces. I did look it up in a book several years ago and found out it was Spratling silver. It was collectible, and that's all I know.
But what her mother could not have known when she first bought this bracelet was that she had not just chosen a piece of jewelry she loved, she had unknowingly preserved a design connected to a man who helped transform the history of Mexican silver. When the expert examined the bracelet, the most important detail was not only the material or the appearance, it was the name behind it. William Spratling. In the world of Mexican silver, Spratling is considered one of the most influential figures. He helped turn Taxco from a city known for its silver resources into an internationally recognized center for handcrafted design. In 1931, Spratling opened his silver workshop in Taxco and began developing a completely new approach. Instead of simply copying popular European designs, he drew inspiration from Mexican culture, history, and artistic traditions, combining those influences with a more modern design language. And this bracelet represents that vision. It is known as the River of Life. More than just a simple silver bangle, its shape and movement create a distinctive style, the kind of details that collectors associate with Spratling's work. But the clues that help reveal more about its significance were the marks left on the piece. Those marks placed it between the 1940s and 1948, an important period before Mexico introduced the eagle mark system. For collectors, pieces from this early era are especially interesting because they represent the foundation years of the Taxco silver movement. And Spratling's influence went far beyond the pieces he personally designed. His workshop also trained many craftsmen who would later continue developing Mexican silver in their own ways. That is why the value of a bracelet like this is not only measured by the amount of silver used, It comes from the maker, the period when it was created, and the role it represents in the history of Mexican jewelry. A piece that was once purchased simply because someone loved it eventually became part of a much larger design story.
Those spherical balls there have been compressed, but it's in generally very nice shape for its age.
Good.
At an auction, I would give it an estimate of $1,000 to $2,000.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
From a bracelet originally bought for only a few dollars, it became a piece that collectors now recognize. But the most interesting part is not just how much its value changed. It is the fact that an ordinary family piece carried the mark of someone who helped shape an entire craft movement. A small silver bracelet from Taxco ultimately became a story about William Spratling and the legacy he left behind in 20th century design history. This next case begins with a ring that many people might judge only by looking at the diamonds. How large are the stones? Would it be worth more if they were removed and turned into something modern? But in antique jewelry, sometimes the greatest value is not found by changing a piece. It is found in everything the piece has managed to keep. Because this ring does not only carry diamonds, it carries a family story, a connection to the past, and a small piece of the Victorian era that survived for more than a century.
The ring belonged to my great-grandmother.
Who happens to be this lady here?
That's that lady there, yes.
In her court dress, perhaps, with fine lace and pearls, and that signals a pretty elevated status, doesn't it?
She was married to a guy called Clement Smith, and he was Queen Victoria's vicar.
Those few details immediately changed the story behind this ring. It was no longer just an old piece of jewelry. It belonged to a real person with a family history and a connection to the world of Queen Victoria through Clement Smith. But its value was not because it was a royal artifact. What fascinated the expert was how much of its original identity had survived. This is a Victorian 5-stone diamond ring, a 19th century style where multiple diamonds work together instead of relying on one large center stone. Over time, many antique rings have been altered. The stones are removed, recut, or placed into modern settings because people believe that will make them more valuable. But once that happens, something impossible to replace disappears: the original history. This ring was special because it still kept the setting, craftsmanship, and feeling of the period when it was created. Collectors are not only looking for diamonds. They are looking for pieces that still carry their original story. That is why the expert did not see this as a ring that should be taken apart. He saw it as a piece of the 19th century that had survived almost exactly as it was meant to be.
And this would be a complete travesty because this is a mid-19th century ring looking absolutely wonderful as it is. And I don't think anybody would dream much of doing that. So very pretty, original condition, enviable, marketable. So £3,000 to £5,000.
£3,000 to £5,000. But the real lesson was not only about the price. The value came from the fact that the ring remained unchanged after more than 150 years. If someone removed the diamonds, the stones would still exist. But the story around them would disappear. And that is what makes this Victorian 5-stone diamond ring special. Sometimes in antiques, the most valuable thing is not making something look newer. It is protecting the history that is already there.
Blue sky, huge crowd, great jewellery. One's a pendant, which I have here, and one is this rather dark, slightly sombre looking box. Tell me a bit about where they came from.
Well, I inherited them from my grandma.
With many antiques, the smallest details surrounding an object can sometimes be just as important as the piece itself. An old box, a tiny inscription, or a detail that seems ordinary can become the clue that helps experts uncover the true story behind an item.
However, when we look inside the lid of the box, we see that it has the name VEVER. Now, VEVER were a French company based in Paris.
And just one name completely changed the story. In the world of antique jewelry, the maker behind a piece can have a huge influence on its value. Historic jewelry houses attract collectors not only because of the materials they used, but also because of their distinctive style, craftsmanship, and artistic legacy.
Now the flower itself looks a little bit like a convolvulus flower, which we know as bindweed actually. This particular flower is morning glory.
The details of the brooch continue to support the story suggested by the box. Art Nouveau jewelry is known for taking inspiration from the natural world, using flowing shapes and organic designs to transform small pieces of jewelry into miniature works of art.
I think that would probably be worth something like £5,000.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Well, could even make 6 or 7.
The final valuation showed why provenance matters so much in the antique market. Two pieces may contain similar materials, but an item connected to a respected jewelry maker can hold a completely different level of appeal for collectors.
But you would agree, it's a very, very attractive piece. £6,000.
Wow.
The biggest surprise was that a small detail preserved over time helped reveal the story behind the entire brooch. That is what makes discoveries like this so fascinating. On Antiques Roadshow, value is not always hidden only in the object itself. Sometimes the overlooked details around it become the key to seeing a piece in an entirely new way. And the next item in today's countdown continues with another surprising discovery, where one small detail leads experts to one of the most famous jewelry names in the world. A family heirloom watch is usually enough to spark curiosity. But this case came with something extra. A tiny Louis Vuitton jewelry box. And when a Cartier watch is stored inside a miniature Louis Vuitton trunk, the story instantly becomes far more interesting. The owner brought in a watch that had traveled through generations of her family, from her great-grandmother to her grandparents, then her parents, and finally to her.
I brought a watch that was my great-grandmother's. It was passed down from my great-grandparents to my grandparents to my parents and then to me. Along with the watch, they gave me my great-grandmother's jewelry box, which I store it in.
The appraiser quickly realized this was no ordinary Cartier. It was a limited production Cartier ladies' tank dating to the mid-1970s. Diamonds appeared almost everywhere on the watch, from the dial and lugs to the case itself. Even the crown was set with a diamond rather than the sapphire typically found on most Cartier ladies' watches.
You're not going to see a whole lot like this particular model. It's a Cartier ladies' tank. This is circa mid-1970s. The reason it's so unique, it was a limited production.
At this point, most people would assume that Cartier was the star of the story. But the appraiser suddenly shifted his attention to the box. As it turned out, the miniature Louis Vuitton trunk had a story of its own. Back in the 1950s, it was a display piece in a store and was never intended to be sold. Yet the owner's great-grandmother managed to convince the store to let her have it after purchasing an entire set of luggage.
And this was on display. It wasn't for sale. And she was able to convince the store to give it to her because she had purchased the larger size steamer trunk and the luggage.
Looking at the two pieces side by side, the appraiser could almost picture their original owner. A woman who loved famous brands, appreciated quality, and clearly knew how to get what she wanted.
What I see here is Cartier, French company, Louis Vuitton, French company. She liked everything French. She liked good names, good quality, owning nice things.
Then came the surprise.
So this one in today's market, a retail price on that is going to be $10,000 to $12,000.
Wow.
In today's market, retail on that, $2,000.
Wow.
The Cartier was valued at $10,000 to $12,000. But the little Louis Vuitton box carried a value of its own, around $2,000. Once again, Antique Roadshow reminded everyone of something surprisingly common in the world of hidden treasures. Sometimes the treasure isn't just what's inside the box. Sometimes the box itself is part of the treasure. If a genuine Picasso had been hanging on the wall above your kitchen stove for decades, would you even realize it? It sounds like the kind of story that's almost impossible to believe. Yet that's exactly how the next appraisal begins. For years, this ceramic plate was simply another familiar decoration that everyone in the family saw every single day. No one thought it was extraordinary. No one imagined it could become one of the biggest surprises of their visit to Antiques Roadshow.
We bought it in Rhode Island. Didn't even realize it was a Picasso. until about 5 years ago.
The family had lived with this piece for a very long time. It had always been part of the house. It wasn't locked away for protection. It wasn't displayed as fine art. It was simply another household object that blended naturally into everyday life. There was never any reason to question what it might actually be.
That it hung over the stove in the kitchen.
Everything changed because of a completely unexpected encounter. A single reaction from someone with professional knowledge was enough to make the family see the plate in an entirely different way. For the first time, they began to wonder whether they had overlooked something remarkable for decades.
Then the guy sort of gasped and said, "Over your stove?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a plate collection."
From that moment on, the process of verifying the plate's identity officially began. The experts carefully examined its details, comparing every characteristic until the true story of the piece slowly came into focus. What had once been treated as ordinary kitchen decor was now entering an entirely different world.
The actual name for this particular dish is Face in an Oval. Picasso did a lot of these special editions for the Madura studio in the south of France.
All right.
He actually did 633 different objects that were taken and they made special editions for. Some are jugs, some are figures, and some are dishes of different shapes and all. Now, you did mention that there was a little bit of enamel loss there, yes. And we do see that pretty regularly on some of these pieces that have high relief.
Yes.
But otherwise, it's in quite remarkable condition. What's really important to note for this is that in this particular issue, and by the way, this was done in 1955.
By now, everyone understood that this was far more than a decorative plate. Only one question remained unanswered. What was it actually worth in today's market?
The Picasso market, in the last 4 or 5 years, it's skyrocketed. It's just taken off tremendously. So you're snickering in advance. This is good. So what do you think it's worth today?
I haven't a clue.
You haven't a clue? Would you be surprised that an auction value in today's market, probably on the conservative side, would be in the range of $10,000 to $15,000? I love you too.
From a ceramic plate that spent decades hanging quietly above a family kitchen stove, to an authenticated work valued at between $10,000 and $15,000. It's a reminder that the line between an everyday decoration and a collectible work of art can be far smaller than most of us ever imagine.
It belongs to my mother.
Yes.
She was left it in a will about 55 years ago.
Yes.
And she wore it as a young lady.
Yes.
Went dancing in it, and it fell off. So that's why it's been left in its box in the safe.
For many years, this serpent bracelet was kept away and rarely appeared again. But behind its impressive design was a story that went far beyond an ordinary piece of gold and diamond jewelry. During the Victorian era, images used in jewelry were often chosen with a purpose. Each symbol could represent love, memory, or personal messages that the owner wanted to preserve. And the serpent shape on this bracelet was the first important clue.
Yes, the snake biting its tail is a very ancient emblem of eternity. It's called the Ouroboros, the eternally renewing circle. And the fact it's gold that's incorruptible, and these are all metaphors for love.
During the Victorian period, jewelry was not only a display of wealth or social status. Every shape, color, and material could carry its own meaning. The serpent became one of the most famous symbols of this era, especially after serpent jewelry became popular among the European upper class. But after a closer inspection, the expert discovered this bracelet was not simply a piece representing connection. Hidden behind the beauty of gold and diamonds was another layer of meaning, something much deeper and more emotional.
But it's more than that, actually. It's probably a very sophisticated piece of mourning jewelry. So, mourning is love beyond the grave.
Mourning jewelry was created to preserve memories of loved ones who had passed away. Rather than just decoration, these pieces became personal keepsakes, combining craftsmanship with the stories of the people who owned them. And on this bracelet, a small hidden detail on the back revealed its true meaning.
And so I think it's worth £8,000 to £10,000.
Really? As much as that? Ooh, goodness.
The hidden details transformed this bracelet from a beautiful piece of jewelry into an object preserving memories from nearly 2 centuries ago. together with its flexible design, well-preserved enamel, and diamond-decorated serpent head, the piece showed the exceptional craftsmanship of the Victorian era. A bracelet that spent years locked away in a safe ultimately revealed a story of love, loss, and the jewelry-making skill of a time long past. Tiffany glass mosaics. Could pieces of glass removed from an old building actually be the remains of a masterpiece created more than 100 years ago? At first glance, they might look like decorative pieces left behind after a renovation. But behind these glass fragments is the story of Tiffany Studios, one of the most famous names in American decorative art history. And the discovery began with a building that had been forgotten for decades.
Tell me how you came to acquire these very large and heavy pieces.
We took possession of the Farwell building in 2015, 100 years after it was built. The three main lobby glass tile domes were Louis Tiffany. They were in severe disrepair. They were not restorable.
What makes this story special is that these were not individual Tiffany objects created for display. They were once part of a complete architectural space where glass, color, and light came together as one large design. But after many years, much of the original structure was no longer intact.
The building had been vacant for 35 years or so. Lots of things were destroyed and stolen. So we rebuilt the ceilings completely, and these are the remnants of what was there.
That is why the surviving pieces became much more important. Many historic architectural details disappear over time, but these glass sections still preserve traces of a historic Tiffany project. And even more surprisingly, their origin was clearly documented.
Well, I can tell you that Tiffany was so proud of this that they even published an ad stating that they had just done the work in the Farwell building. So this was something that Tiffany wanted to advertise prominently. And the building did open in March of 1915. And Tiffany decorated the first floor corridors with these wonderful barrel vaulted ceilings with rib vaults.
This historical record transformed the glass pieces from remnants of an old building into part of the legacy of Tiffany Studios. In the collecting world, provenance like this can make a huge difference. And finally, the true value of these century-old mosaics was revealed.
This one, I would say more like $15,000 to $20,000. This one, I would say $30,000 to $40,000.
Wow, that's incredible.
$30,000 to $40,000 on that, and I would say $30,000 to $40,000 on that.
From pieces of glass that seemed like simple remains of an old structure, they became a memorable discovery on Antiques Roadshow. Their value came not only from the Tiffany name, but also from the story of a time when architecture, craftsmanship, and art were brought together into one creation. Martin Brothers Double Grotesque Bird Jar. Continuing the countdown are ceramic pieces that were never designed to look perfect or traditionally elegant. With oversized beaks, unusual eyes, and almost human-like expressions, these birds have always divided opinions. But that strange appearance is exactly what made Martin Brothers pottery one of the most recognizable styles in ceramics.
There are fewer things more distinctive than Martin Brothers pottery. And I think if we went round this crowd here and asked them their opinion, it would be a very mixed and split audience between love, loathe, and plain curiosity. So I have to ask, of those three, which are you?
Martin ware was never created to please everyone. Its appeal comes from the combination of skilled craftsmanship and unusual imagination. For the owner, her love for these pieces started long before the market fully recognized their value.
Well, I was left a very small vase, which isn't here, many years ago, and I fell in love with Martin ware.
But in the 70s, whilst Martin Brothers was beginning to become recognised, it was still derided by many people.
At that time, many people still considered these ceramic creatures too strange. But he saw personality in every expression. Martin Brothers was a pottery workshop run by the four Martin brothers, known for handmade creations unlike anything else. Their famous grotesque bird jars were more than decorative objects. Each bird felt like its own character, with a mood, attitude, and story.
And, you know, this chap here, this pair of birds, just turn it round, they're giving each other a hug. These boys are friends.
That sense of life is what made Martin ware increasingly desirable among collectors. Over time, the features once considered strange became the exact reasons people wanted them. The glaze, expression, rarity, and condition could all greatly affect the value. And in this collection, the biggest surprise was the double bird jar.
It's a great looking pair, good colour, but it isn't as big as that one at the end of the day, and we've got to factor that in. And because it isn't as big, but it is a double, it's worth £60,000.
This pair alone was valued at £60,000, bringing the collection to an incredible level. But the most remarkable part is that the owner did not collect them because of a trend. He loved them when many people still did not understand Martin Ware's value. The strange faces, unusual expressions, and once controversial designs became what made them unforgettable. Sometimes the greatest value begins with seeing beauty where others do not.